Hello, everyone. My name is Nelson Lim. I'm the Executive Director of Fels. And before I begin, just like John did, for all the mother out here, happy Mother Days. This is a proud and happy occasion for us, and I'm glad that you all could join us. First, we would like to celebrate our graduates again, so please join me congratulating the class of 2017. Second, I would like to recognize the contribution made by the family and friends of our students. Congratulations to you as well. Your love and support has sustained our students throughout their journey. Their success is also your success. Since 1937, the Fels Institute of Government has educated generations of distinguished public leaders. Their accomplishments are our legacy, and they are the author of our history. I'm confident that this year's graduating class will continue this tradition by writing their own chapter in the enduring history of Fels. Each individual graduating today has much to contribute to the public good. Today, you will hear from two of our graduates and get a small sample of the talent in this group. When you hear our student speakers, you will understand why I'm so confident about their success. It is my great pleasure to introduce our students' commencement speakers, two of our very best, Salomon Moreno-Rosa, representing our full-time students, and Liza Druck, representing our executive students. Please join me in welcoming Salomon and Liza.
So, before I give my address, the mothers in the room cannot be recognized enough. So I'd like to take another moment to acknowledge the mothers here today. Mother's Day is always a very special day for me. And this one in particular is even more special. My mother just became an American citizen just a few months ago. After nearly 30 years of tireless hard work and waiting. And so, despite today being graduation day, I am lucky that I get to stand up here and be the one beaming with pride over all of her accomplishments. When I was a child, I was a dreamer, I was an idealist, and I was arrogant. At some point in my early childhood, in the conceited recesses of my pre-developed brain, a narcissistic conviction took root and convinced me that the moon followed me everywhere I went. This is a real story. Strapped in the backseat of my mother's four-door Honda sedan, I would gaze out the window as we drove down the streets of my New England college town, passing the libraries, passing the bus stops, the students, each figure growing larger in sight as we approached them, only to evaporate into the night behind us as we sped on. But that stubborn moon always stayed put in the sky, no matter the distance we drove, no matter the speed we went. And as a kid, my imagination had me convinced that the moon had devoted itself to me. After all, there it was, every single night, surveying my route home like my ultimate nighttime protector. You see, this pre-adolescent divine self-perception that I had was quite extraordinary, considering the circumstances. How could the son of a single, undocumented mother who was raising 3 kids all alone and fighting tooth and nail to escape poverty have the brazenness to think that the stars were put in the sky for his amusement. Especially on those 10 p.m. car rides traveling home to a one-bedroom apartment where people took turns sleeping on beds made out of blankets on the ground in order to accommodate two families occupying the same space. How could that little boy have the arrogance to think that the world revolved around him? An acknowledgement that my path has not been the outcome of individual achievements garnered by virtue of special innate talents, I stand here today as the product of the collective struggle of so many brave individuals who believed in their inalienable right to thrive and who fostered in me an undying faith that greatness was possible, even in the shadows of so much heartache and sacrifice. Surrounded by the rich, brilliant resilience of those who have lost so much, I have contemplated deeply the notion of what it means to be excellent. We often determine value based on tangibles, such as status symbols, such as earnings or credentials. We often uphold false narratives about those who are good and worthy of our service, while looking down upon those we consider undeserving. Those who fit narrowly defined parameters of excellence are often awarded with even greater support and even more attention from those with access to power. In fact, the most oppressed in our society are especially subject to this type of unemotional assessment. We're so quick to point to the limited instances of first-generation valedictorians, or the few immigrant small business owners turned CEOs to highlight extraordinary feats of greatness in the face of adversity, as if the standard yardstick of achievement could only be measured by one's economic or intellectual contributions to society. Because by doing this, we neglect the stories of those whose radical persistence to simply exist truly embodies what it means to be extraordinary. I stand up here today to knock down misconstrued perceptions of excellence that falsely equate human value to material worth or educational accolades. 8 years ago, I was a teenage kid trying to figure out how to get into college. At the time, I was a dreamer, I was an idealist, and I was arrogant. That spring, I received my acceptance letter to Penn, and in a state of deep pride and ecstasy, believing that my exceptionalism had finally been validated, I called my mother to celebrate my new Ivy League distinction. But despite my eager pleas to explain the prestige of getting into an elite institution like Penn, her response was an unimpressed mixture of gratitude and feigned enthusiasm. And as I look back at that moment, so many years later, I can't help but understand her confusion. How could I have expected her to derive significance from an unfamiliar system of higher education college rankings, when the simple act of me waking up every morning already constituted a miracle in her mind? You see, my mother fled her home during the height of a civil war so that one day her children might have the chance to live a life where they wouldn't have to fear the sun going down. Where I could live a childhood imagining divine lunar intervention and have a shot at pursuing my dream of earning an education. You see, in her eyes, I had already achieved the distinction of excellence long before Penn decided I was worthy of it. It was a sobering realization that I've carried with me ever since. That if I want to better understand this world around me, I have to reevaluate my perceptions of excellence by learning to radically reassess my prescriptions of value. As I stand here today, on the verge of walking away with 2 master's degrees from Penn, I must take that lesson with me and continually remind myself that my education alone does not make me exceptional. As we all graduate today with the elite markers of distinction and the social capital afforded to us by our Penn degrees, we must enter the world with a great deal of humility. We must go in with the understanding that tackling the major social issues of our day is not a performance. We cannot exploit the struggle for justice because of a desire for credibility or moral absolution. To engage in this work here means to dismantle our internal savior complexes and to enter genuine agreements of equal partnership with those whom we seek to serve. We all chose to come to Fels because we believed that addressing critical social issues was our highest calling in life, and that through policy and through leadership, we could be effective change agents. You see, the tools earned here at Fels will continue to shape us and will allow us to identify and unlock greatness in those whom we come in contact with. But that alone will not do enough to change our thinking about how we measure the contribution of others. We must learn how to accept the excellence of those who have never been deemed great. We must learn how to notice genius in small places while chipping away at our own false notions of exceptionalism. You see, I come from a powerful line of people whose lives were imperfect, characterized by sleep deprivation, back problems, and hard, calloused hands. My drive to excel was not inspired by individuals who could tout traditional measures of excellence, but rather by folks who woke up early 6 days a week to serve customers, wash dishes, clean restaurant tables. My inspiration came from immigrant workers whose beautiful, broken English never stopped them from paying their bills on time. It came from brilliant individuals who, in the shadows of so much heartache and sacrifice, dared to resist the narrative of expendability. They paved the way for me to stand up here today and to share a story that so many voiceless individuals never get a chance to tell. These days, I'm 26 years old. I'm a dreamer. I'm an idealist. And I'm doing what I can to stay humble. Excellence, as we know it, has always been a figment of the imagination. Take the tools you learned here at Fels and go experience the brilliant nature of the true geniuses who no one ever talks about. Thank you.
All right, I have to do it. I have to say Happy Mother's Day, especially to my mom and my aunt and my stepmom who are in the audience. They are all examples of what it means to put others ahead of self, and I wouldn't be here but for what I learned from them today. So there's a story that I want to share with you guys. It's a story that's been in the back of my mind for these past few months as I thought about what I wanted to say today. It's a story that starts, like Sal, when I was a child. I was 4 years old, and I met Neil Armstrong in a golf course parking lot. He was getting out of his car, and my grandma pointed him out, and she asked if I'd like to meet him. I said, of course. But then when the moment of truth came, I panicked, and I buried myself into my grandma's leg. I was too overwhelmed to even look him in the eye. I knew who he was, and that first man on the moon was important, but I was 4, and so he was mostly just a kind, approachable grandpa in a golf course parking lot. As I grew up, and I learned more about Neil Armstrong in school, my teacher's comments about, oh, you can do anything when you grow up. You can even go to the moon. That really meant something to me. I would tap the shoulder of the kid next to me and say, she's not kidding. That Neil Armstrong guy, he's just like a suburban grandpa. He parks his cars in parking lots. I realize now that the lens through which I viewed his contribution to history was always slightly distorted by that memory when I was 4. He was approachable and he was kind, so how could he be that big of a deal? But then when he died in 2012 and memorials and tributes were everywhere, I couldn't stop thinking about that memory in the parking lot when I was 4. I was at my computer one night and I scrolled upon that famous picture of Neil Armstrong grinning that big smile after his moonwalk. It was that same kind, approachable smile that the grandpa in the golf course parking lot had. And in that moment, the magnitude of who he was and what he'd done, and that I had been in his presence, the presence of a hero, it all came together. And again, I found myself overwhelmed. So why am I telling you this story today? I promise it's not so that I can tell you to shoot for the moon so that even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. This is not that kind of graduation speech, and I wouldn't do that to you guys. As I said before, my impression of Neil Armstrong's contribution to history was always distorted by his kindness, his approachability, and my familiarity with him. I think in some ways, these last 2 years have had a similar effect on all of us. When we arrived at Fels nearly 2 years ago, we were strangers to one another. We were just everyday people bound by a desire to do good. But it didn't take long before we got comfortable with each other, and we started forming the kind of bonds that build familiarity. We rolled up our sleeves, and we got to work. We started learning and solving problems and helping one another, both inside the classroom and out. We would get together, and we would celebrate the kinds of things that everyday people celebrate amongst themselves, like when Alex got engaged, and when Elaine got married, and especially when Teddy and Charlie were born. These were the kinds of things that cemented our bonds of friendship and our familiarity with one another. But at the same time that all of these things were happening, something else was happening in the background. The seeds of extraordinary work were being sowed. Our favorite New Jersey freeholder, Hank, is now running for state representative. Mike was elected to run the Atlantic County Democratic Party machine. Scott is making sure the good people of Switzerland have enough aspirin and sunscreen. And Adam is fighting for the kids harder than anyone else in Philadelphia. Slowly and incrementally, we've started doing really extraordinary things. And here I stand today, and I'm struck again by that same overwhelming feeling I felt when Neil Armstrong died. The sense of awe and wonder that I have been in the presence of everyday people who do extraordinary things. It's funny how easy it is to lose sight of greatness when it's right in front of you. At the time that I met Neil Armstrong, he was just an ordinary guy who happened to have done an extraordinary thing. He may have gone to the moon, but above all else, he was kind and approachable. After spending 2 years with you guys, I have no reason to believe that your lives will be any different. I cannot exaggerate how grateful I am to have worked with such dedicated, talented, amazing public servants who, above all else, are kind and approachable and genuinely good people. There is no doubt in my mind that the people in this room are among the best suited to solve the hardest problems of our time. I'm not exaggerating. You guys know how convicted I get, and there is one thing I believe in, it is the people in this room. You guys are amazing, and I am so proud to call every one of you a classmate and a friend. And as proud as I am today, I know that this is just the beginning. And now this is the part where I tell you to shoot for the moon, so that even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. But I'm not going to do that, because this is not that kind of graduation speech, and I wouldn't do that to you guys. Thank you.